McCormack.
Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss a variety of issues facing government and industry leaders regarding data center optimization. With me on today's show are Sean Torpey, Acting Chief Information Officer and Deputy Assistant Administrator for Information and Technology at the FAA. Monique Bourque, Assistant Director of Innovation, Engineering, and Data Center Operations, Department of Justice. Anthony Vicinelly, Federal Technology Director, Nlyte Software. Melonie Parker, Division Chief, Enterprise Operations Center, Department of State. Jonathan Alboum, Chief Technology Officer, Veritas Public Sector. And David Peed, Vice President and General Manager of Equinix. Well, December 2010 was when we had the good old 25-point plan that sort of started this journey about, what is a data center? How do we count data centers? How do we consolidate data centers? And then eventually we had Cloud First, and then of course just recently OMB has issued Cloud Smart. And I would submit that a lot of the technology that is available now, you can make any data center really a cloud. And Suzette Kent reminds us all just the other day, number one priority, we need to make sure we're staying focused on the citizen services. We need to make sure we're staying focused on those farmers, the small business owners, the air traffic controllers, the diplomats, the law enforcement personnel, et cetera, et cetera. Sean, let's start off with you and let's just talk about first progress that the FAA is making regarding data center optimization.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Luke. So when we first started this journey, 13, 14 years ago, we had 367 data centers. So we had a very large footprint. And what we've done, we went through and we started to consolidate, because the journey's been, that's exactly what it's been. It's been this journey where before it was just about shutting down data centers, now it's about optimizing data centers and getting workloads in the cloud. So the scope has changed, but it's gotten actually better. We've consolidated 87 data centers down as of this month, actually.
Wow.
We awarded a cloud contract in 2015. We've migrated about 17% of our workloads to the cloud, and we're looking at expanding that significantly. Currently, right now, we also did a big push for our servers and virtualization.
Sure.
So we went through and we have 71% of our servers are now virtualized. We went to two main enterprise data centers, 500 miles apart, to make sure that we had high availability in the agency. And now with our cloud offering, it gives us even more flexibility. And what we have been able to do is actually reduce our data center staff by 25%. So we've been able to optimize our footprint, shrink, look at workloads, getting them into the cloud, and lowering our maintenance costs from a people perspective.
Well, that's fantastic. And for a person that does quite a bit of flying, we're glad that you do have some redundancy there. And you're right. I mean, it's goal congruence, right? It's data center optimization. A lot of this technology has allowed us to do this, the virtualization, et cetera. Right. Monique, how about at Justice? I know you guys are up to a whole lot of good things over there regarding optimization.
Right. So similar good news stories. So it's nice to be able to retrospectively take a look back and look at this, because the change takes time, but it's been a very positive change for the department across this space. So we started out with 110 data centers. I like to coin, we're in our last mile. We're working towards 3 core enterprise facilities. We've matured those facilities, and we're down to our last 12 to migrate over the next year and a half. So
it's been a journey.
It has been. A little bit of elbow room, and the new decoy guidance gave us a little bit more time, but we've been tracking pretty well. We also have been similar progress on our cloud migration front as well. We have, it's how you, we have over 100 systems. Those systems are loosely defined, but moved into the cloud, but it's across 13 of our components. So a good third of our components are active in the cloud space and have systems in production out there. We've moved over about 6,000 VMs, and it's about 6 petabyte of data out there now.
Wow.
Petabyte, excuse me.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so we also have a department-wide contract vehicle for enterprise cloud task order, and so really what we have found is working closely with the components, breaking down the data sets, what is cloud ready has worked well, and we're working towards maturing some of the data center services so we can optimize right across the board. So from a sort of shared network infrastructure backbone, so beyond the lift and shift, looking at the optimization there. We have very well-run core enterprise facilities. We're comfortable with our facilities there, and now we're looking at what can we do more. We have pockets of sort of best in breed with our cloud services, and we're also building our on-prem cloud services at this point.
Right.
So it's all moving and maturing to the next level.
Right. You're really sort of pushing it up the value chain now, and what you're starting to see, I know at Justice and other places, is organic builds, right? It's not a lift and shift, it's a new build, and maybe part of that runs in a private cloud, part of that runs in a public cloud, it's meshed together. And a lot of that software, Anthony, I know that there's always all these different types of technology, really a tectonic shift in the technology that's allowing this to happen. So tell us what's happening in Nlyte in regards to data center optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. The Nlyte's goal is to help our customers make progress with data center optimization. And we've sat at the center of that for since the DCOI memo first came out, the version 1 memo first came out. So being able to provide people with a process to gather that data, to be able to look and start to make cloud smart decisions with that data positions us well for the second version of the memo. Right, so what we found was that for folks to be able to start to make some of these decisions about what is going to be consolidated, what is going to be migrated to maybe a co-located facility or shared service facility, or what's going to be moved to the cloud, folks had to have a clear understanding of what they currently had to be able to rationalize what was going to be able to move where, to be able to have an accurate inventory of those assets, and then be able to make decisions based off of, what should we keep, what should we get rid of, right? So Nlyte has been able to do that, as well as enable folks to share that data between either from an agency level up to the department level, up to OMB, to create, to kind of break down some of those barriers to share data across agencies and up to the department level.
Yeah, I mean, what's really key about this, and the only way you're going to be able to optimize is you have to make informed decisions, right? And then it becomes, okay, so now I understand what it is, and then I start to get into, okay, so where do I run this? And again, maybe I run it here, there, maybe I run it in both, right? It's a decision you can make once you've been informed, and better instrumentation lets you do that.
That's true, and what we found is that there has been better and better guidance put out there for people to adopt a policy or a strategy going forward.
Well, that's just that evolution. I mean, look, all of us were out there literally counting boxes and counting racks, and and then saying, is this a data center, is it not? I think it's a broom closet, all those sort of things. So we're at a point now where, things have gotten a lot more sophisticated, which is great, and the technology has allowed us to do that in a lot of cases. Melonie, we'll talk about a global footprint. You all are certainly working across the globe. Tell us what's happening over at State in regards to optimization.
Sure. Like my colleagues, Sean and Monique has already said, and thank you, Luke, yes, we are global. Our mission is global, right? So across the platform of Department of State, we've had the when you said 2010, my mind went back like, wow, I've been here doing this since FDCCI, right? So it's been a long time, but we've made a lot of progress. One of the things, our first initiative was to understand what we're working with, what we have, how many data centers do we have out there. And through that count, we ended up with around 400 data centers, mostly domestic, but out of those 400 data centers, we're talking about over 150,000 pieces of equipment that we had to. And as you alluded to earlier, Luke, what is a data center? The definition has changed from each iteration, right? Yeah. With this optimization. So now we're working with M1919. The department, we've gone out, we've had 55 closures since the iteration of FDCCI. And it may not seem like a huge number, but when you're dealing with overseas posts in other locations that are unique to our environment. We tout it as that's a huge accomplishment for the team. Something else at the department that we've looked into a few years ago, I mentioned that we stood up a modular data center farm out here locally in a metropolitan area. We are happy to just continue to announce that with that modular data center, we've been able to stay at about a 1.1 PUE, and with cloud and other technologies that we're implementing, we had the virtualization first policy in place, and then we started leveraging on the cloud smart environment and things of that nature. So the Department of State, we're right in line, and again, just to hear what Justice is doing in FAA, although the missions may be a tad bit different, we're right in line with our other colleagues at the federal sector.
Yeah, and it's every agency has a very similar type story in some regards, or they're trying to follow the same rules and policies and procurement, regulations, et cetera. But they also have their own unique stories and things that operationally that they have to deal with. So it's very good to be pointing that out. Jonathan, how about over at Veritas? I know you all are very much involved in this data center optimization activity and helping all the agencies through the use of this great technology.
Sure. So a couple of things and some reactions to what we've already heard. I think that the definition of what a data center is really important, and it's changed, as Melonie said, over time. And I think that gives some flexibility to CIOs to be really strategic about things they focus on closing versus things they don't focus on closing. Back when I worked in the government, we were trying to close things that were server closets or a computer room, and that didn't really provide a lot of value. So now that we can be focused on closing things that are really look like data centers, we can use technology to help us understand the systems and the data that's stored in those locations. And once you understand the data, now you have a pathway, because some data is going to fit better in different environments than others. Some data needs to be able to flow from one organization to another seamlessly, so it's going to impact where you host the system over the long term. So it comes back to understanding, from our perspective, it comes back to understanding what and where your data is, and then having a good plan for managing that data over the long term. And the other thing that I really like about the way this the new data center optimization memo is written, it gives some nice incentives, but there are metrics that we're trying to shoot for that seem achievable, right, and seem understandable. And that drives this whole notion of IT analytics, right? You need to be able to capture data about your environment, not just the data in your environment, but data about your environment. And once you have that, now you can make even smarter choices about turning off storage or turning off data protection or turning off different things that are duplicative and not adding a lot of value. We've added a lot of technology over time, and it doesn't always get used the way we expect it to.
That's exactly right, and the technology, again, is so advanced now, and let's face it, what gets measured gets done, but sometimes that has unintended consequences, right? And so as we learn to get, again, more fine-grained on this, and again, the technology continues to present itself in a way that allows these sort of breakthrough capabilities to pursue. Yeah, all of a sudden, you want the policies to be lining up to that.
And what I found over my career is if I can present information to executives in a way that's digestible and it's not very technical, but I can show them that this information says you're spending more money than you need to because you're not taking these actions, and they can understand it in real terms, then I can get some mind share around turning something off or moving something to the cloud or keeping something on premise, because I can do a cost-benefit analysis that's straightforward and do it in terms that are common sense language. That's I found over time really critical to getting executive support for doing these things. You have to, right, because you have a risk anytime I'm going to close something or change something. Someone in a program might say, well, if you do this, XYZ is going to happen to the mission. Right. Well, when I can make it simple for people to understand what the impact is, then I think you can get a lot more progress.
It's all about informed decisions. Sounds like TBM, but that's a whole nother show. Dave, let's talk about capabilities at Equinix. You guys are right smack in the middle of this data center optimization journey. Tell us about what's happening over there.
We are, and actually if you take the combination of everything my colleagues have talked about, what I think we really feel is we give the agencies the ultimate flexibility to do really whatever they want to do at that time and in the future. We have 200 data centers globally, so we kind of the ultimate distributed architecture and giving the agencies the flexibility to dynamically provision connectivity, working with partners like Verizon, as well as if your cloud provider today is Amazon and tomorrow you want it to be somebody else, all of those providers are in our data centers. And what most people don't understand about Equinix is they think of a data center, but all of our data centers are on dense fiber plant, and the true value of the company is the interconnectivity that it provides you. So whether, in the agencies making a decision today that, they want to outsource something to the cloud, well, most likely the cloud provider is in our data center, and most of the cloud providers give really deep discounts for connecting through Equinix, because it's quite honestly, it's cheaper for them to do it that way. And again, you layer on like a partner like Verizon, where they have, contract vehicles, legacy experience, and layering on security and dynamic provisioning. It's a really good story.
Yeah, and let's face it, if you none of this computing capability is of much value if you can't get to it, right? And get access to it, and to get access to it, reliability at high speeds, et cetera. We had a conversation earlier in the day about that. I'd love to talk about specific programs. Monique, let me start with you at Justice, and can you give us an example of a specific program? I know you guys have a whole bunch of examples there that you all are working on that you'd like to share with the community.
Well, I think it's not one of our biggest and sort of, biggest examples, but I think it's one of our recent breakthrough examples that I wanted to highlight. And
we
some
like
of those, the smaller ones sometimes are the ones that sort of, push the envelope. So one of our components recently went through going into a cloud hybrid environment, so cloud and hybrid on-prem. And it was breakthrough in that it was dealing with some sensitive data, right? And they were able to chart a path and move and close a smaller data center and move their data, and some of it's sensitive, so we had to deal with encrypting and moving it and transferring up and over, figuring out the path, what was cloud ready, and what did not need to be re-engineered to move it to the cloud, and then come up with architecting an approach so that we had this combination hybrid with keeping some of the systems that weren't quite ready, keep them at the on-prem solution. We were able to improve overall backup capability, from a COOP standpoint, economize and offer a cheaper footprint going forward for them. So it was a success story all around, and it really involved the consulting services from our cloud management team at the OCIO, along with our enterprise sort of seed funding from the department to help this component move forward and move their data forward. So it was a win-win for everyone, and it also put some tools out in the cloud that a lot of our litigating community was using that hadn't yet really been in the cloud and used efficiently. So it sort of bridged some hurdles on which tool sets could go out there.
Which is fantastic, because it really sort of opens up that aperture and allows Justice, of course, has several different litigating communities there, and sort of de-risk that decision to allow other parts of the department, I would imagine, to then use some of those tools and techniques that are available that are sort of cloud ready or native cloud, right?
Yeah, it really did. To us, it was a nice success story at this point in our journey, because we are looking at that next sort of layer of applications and systems to move to the cloud. And it showed a path where this is data that there's a concern from leadership and management, just where your data is, right?
Sure.
And so it's a legitimate concern, and so it helped us work through those concerns in a collaborative process and alleviate those concerns and come up with sort of an approach that addressed all of them. And then it also helped the mission folks. Everything was moved with no downtime to the mission folks. The mission folks didn't even know it was being moved. It was all in the back end.
Outstanding.
And then it also helps to sort of move the hurdle of those who want to keep their data still close to the vest. So it helped us sort of advance and show that we can do that in certain circumstances, with the right set of circumstances, that it can be done. And this is how we sort of modify in a hybrid to meet all of our needs.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. So you're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. With me on today's show are Sean Torpey with the FAA, Monique Bourque with Department of Justice, Anthony Vicinelly with Nlyte Software, Melonie Parker with the Department of State, Jonathan Alboum with Veritas Public Sector, and David Peed with Equinix. We were talking about data center optimization, and we were talking about specific programs. Jonathan, let me ask you in regards to Veritas. You guys sort of see a large footprint out there. Tell me about a specific program that you'd like to highlight.
Just yesterday, I was speaking to a leader in a federal financial agency, and they were very interested in using cloud to offset costs that they've carried for a long time for things like disaster recovery. So their goal is to use cloud as a DR location for systems that fit nicely in the cloud and can run there over time. As opposed to moving all their systems to the cloud right off the bat, they'd rather leverage cloud technologies to lower other costs, which I thought was a really interesting, creative approach. And the challenge with that, of course, is being able to get your data into that cloud environment quickly. So again, it goes back to understanding what the data is and understanding what your requirements are. But to the extent that you're able to understand those questions, when something bad happens and you have the cloud capability and you can spin that up quickly and transport your data there, or maybe it's already there because of how you've configured your DR, you're able to stay up and running very quickly. So cloud DR is something that Veritas is seeing quite a lot of. Came up in this CIO conversation yesterday as well. The other thing that I think we see a lot of are agencies who want to use the cloud as a place to store their backups. So we have a conceptual architecture where we have data tiering. So when you understand your data and you can make sure that your primary storage is pristine and has the data that you really need. And other environments can have data that's important, but not necessarily data that you interact with on a routine basis.
Sure, and that cloud DR is a slam dunk, right? We all need a good, solid, reliable, and inexpensive DR capability. Sean, you were talking about DR earlier, right. And tell us a little bit about maybe a specific program in regards to some data optimization activities.
Sure. So we we took the low-hanging fruit of the consolidation of these 87 data centers into the two, and then so it was the whole process took us down the path of okay, so let's take field data center, our field servers, file servers, print servers. Let's consolidate those into our data center. So we did that. Mm-hmm. We also but in order to do that, we had to make sure that we had bandwidth availability for these remote sites. We have over 1,000 sites for our mission support network. So if we're taking something from a facility, we have to make sure that the user experience is solid, so that they don't say, well, I can't do my job.
Sure.
So we had to do a migration of circuits, upgrades of circuits, massive bandwidth upgrade across our entire network, so we could then utilize the consolidation efforts. So we consolidated all of our field servers. We eliminated 20 backup grids, and it gave us the opportunity that once we had all this file and print server data in our data center, when we went to looking at a digital storage cloud solution, it just made it easier. Had we gone and tried to jump from field storage directly to the cloud, it just wouldn't have worked for us. So we had to take the steps and the necessary things to make sure that the user experience was solid, and making sure that once we pulled and got ready to go cloud for digital storage, for people's home drives and whatnot, that it worked well for them and it didn't impact the mission.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of that lift, shift, understand what you have, now it's accountable, right? And then you take the technology and move it into an optimization state. I think that's fantastic. Dave, how about at Equinix? I would imagine that you all are right smack in the middle of a lot of these activities that are being described here. Give us one example of a project where you would like to share that is involved with some of this data center optimization techniques.
Sure. Well, the specific example I'll use, maybe not so much focus on the optimization piece, but I'll use it as I talked about. Once the data is at Equinix, it's fast and it's connected, and that's really the true value of the company. In this instance, partnering with Verizon, there was a large civilian agency that found themselves in a predicament where the building they were in was owned by foreign ownership.
Wow.
And so there was an issue. And so they needed to be out in a few months, and partnered with Verizon, proudly to say that we were able to move that agency into an Equinix data center within that time period, and it was just a win-win for the agency and for Equinix and Verizon. And so once now they're understanding the power of Equinix and what, now that they're in our data centers, what that gives them, but being able to transition him in that short period of time was something that we were all very proud of.
Yeah, and it just feels like you can start to get your arms around it once you sort of understand it, right? Because again, you've inventoried it, you know exactly what you have, you can make these informed decisions. Melonie, how about at State? Can you give us a specific example of a project that you all are working on there, or had worked on, that sort of have cracked through this journey of data center optimization?
Certainly. Just recently, we actually sunset a 10-year contract at a vendor location that we had built a house of over 1,500 square feet and of data center of our property there. And you had from HR resources and security resources, NGOs, consular, we had all types of resources there. But first thing we had to do was stand up a team of consultants to help us, because it was a huge lift. And one of the things that Jonathan mentioned earlier was understanding what's in your inventory and using the tools that we have, properly using them and use them to their fullest exposure. So that's one of the things that we were able to do. We closed down a data center, one of our enterprise data centers. So we shrinked our enterprise data center services from 4 to 3, moving the devices from off-prem back onto government-owned property, and that was one of the reasons why we built the modular data centers. And we also have other enterprise data centers on the West Coast as well. But looking at the optimization piece of it, we were able to take all of the devices at the particular location and then spread it across our environment, utilizing the tools that we already had in-house on the government prem. So that was a huge undertaking, mammoth, because just dealing with so many stakeholders, so many resources, everyone was priority. And then when you thought you were at the 11th hour and you were almost done, there was that Easter egg, as they would say, hiding under, oh, this is an important NGO and we cannot shut them down yet. So it was a lot of coordination and things of that nature, but it was a huge success for the department. Financially, it was a huge success. As Monique had said, a lot of it was done in the background, the networking and the core infrastructure. That was in the background. Customers was not aware, but the stakeholders that had to be at the table with us, understanding this is a priority, this is contract related, their dollars, cost savings that we were able to achieve by doing that. So that's a huge success story.
Sure,
for the
and when
department.
you save that kind of money in a data center, I call it sort of the electric bill money. That's money that's paid out, every month, every quarter, every year. And you can reinvest that money into some of these higher order, higher value type capabilities.
You have the
Sean,
opportunity to do that with money that we saved on that 25% of reduction in staff. We actually put that back into building a wireless infrastructure at all of our facilities.
Right.
So we didn't have to go back to the well. I mean, that's true. I mean, you look at the cost of data center footprint compared to cubes. It's significant.
Sure.
And so you're managing all that infrastructure on your facility without the expertise. So that's immediate cost savings that we were able to kick back.
Right, it's not cost avoidance, it's real cost savings. And the fact that, OMB and a variety of others were involved in policies to allow you to do that sort of cut, keep, and reinvest gives all the agencies the motivation to really focus on that and self-fund some of these very important other programs, let's say. Anthony, how about at Nlyte? I would imagine, the only way you can do this and do it smartly and do it efficiently is you have to be able to instrument this capability, understand what you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell us about maybe a project, a program that you've been working on that one of these agencies that have been working on using your capability.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we talk about optimizing the data center and looking at migration of assets either into a co-located facility or shared services facility, decommissioning assets out of the data center, that's a change management process. And so integrating into the existing change management processes that are on site for everything else should not exclude the data center or work that's being done in the data center. So being able to, and we've done this across civilian Department of Defense intel agencies, is to be able to tie into those change management systems and build a process around that change. So not only are we managing or helping folks manage the what's currently being used, but let me start to build efficiencies around getting things in and getting things out of the data center, things that are being received on the loading dock, making sure that things aren't staying too long in the data center or becoming unmanaged in the data center, just
or underutilized.
Or underutilized, exactly. So building that process to help folks with, for example, like goods receiving, to say, oh, this has just got on site. I want to start to rack and stack this as quickly as possible. And whenever it's come to the end of its usable life, let's get it out and let's make sure that there's a chain of custody to make sure that we're getting that out. If you do that in a process or an agreed upon process, then you can start to measure it, right? And you can start to then forecast for how well you're doing, how well one group is doing versus another. And so those are some things we've seen some real...
if you can measure it, you can manage it. And let's move over and talk about lessons learned. All of you are early adopters or have been involved with folks that are early adopters. I'm going to start with you, Melonie. Sometimes there's unintended consequences, right, behind some of these things and these different activities. Can you share with the audience some lessons learned that they can, take in and, learn from the wisdom of some of the activities that you all have done over there?
Certainly. I don't think I'm going to say anything earth-shattering or breaking news.
Well, sometimes it's just a small little nuance, right? And it makes a big difference.
For us, it all stemmed on communication, right? I was speaking with the team before coming here, and is communication or is it the empowerment of senior leadership or the endorsement of senior leadership? I think they go hand in hand. They're 1A and 1A working together. We can communicate all day long, but if you don't have the backing, and again, because of our environment, the type of, like you said, Luke, every organization has their own unique nuances going on, but in our organization, not having the backing of the senior leadership, but having that backing and not appropriately communicating it, one of our lessons learned is that we are not only working with IT professionals, but we're also working with those that provide us that electricity bill, those facility personnel. Having them to understand from an IT seat, and Jonathan, I'm using you again because Jonathan talked about bringing the message down to a level that you can communicate and that they understand, bringing that message down to a level where they may not understand petabytes and terabytes and all of these other things, but when we're talking about PUE and the other monitoring electricity type of environmental core things, having that communication at their level so they understand that being invested in this mission, that we're all in it together. It's not just the IT side of the house, but we have to work collectively as a team to actually achieve and meet those mandates that OMB and others are throwing at it, even if it's cloud smart, because you have to work with them to understand the environment and how to elevate what if we're going to be in a hybrid situation, or if we're going to, this financial system can't go in a cloud for whatever reason, however that other metrics counting for the assets can go in a cloud system. So it's a collective effort and it's continual communication. One of the things that we did is we established a quarterly, and we're doing it right now quarterly, but we did basically a round table quarterly so that we're communicating the message to all of the stakeholders, regardless if it's budget, if they're facilities, or if they're IT. Everyone hears the same message, and we're getting the message, and then we have the Q&A. And it's working well.
Communication, plain language, and let's face it, I don't care who you are, pretty much everyone's paid an electric bill, so they understand that. Jonathan, how about at Veritas? Can you give us one example of lessons learned?
So I think what we've seen is that complexity ruins IT, right? So taking complexity out lowers risk and gives you a greater chance to operate smoothly. So one of the complexities that we see, and I saw as a CIO, is too many different products in a data center. They all have to get integrated together, and they're very smart engineers that can do that. However, when there are stress conditions, peak season, whatever it is, sometimes those integrations fail. So falling back on established platforms, I think, is a best practice. And at Veritas, we have an enterprise data services platform that helps ensure data and systems to be available, data protected, and then available so you can get insight out of it. So availability, protection, and insight is sort of where we begin and end our conversations, how you get there. And you get there through platforms, and you get there through less complexity.
Lower your complexity, raise your capability. Sean, how about at the FAA? I'm sure you have some lessons learned as you guys have been on this journey moving through the optimization capability.
Well, it sounds like Melonie works in my agency because we're dealing with the same sorts of things. People, process, technology. Yes. Technology is sound. Process is through NIS 853, Rev 4, 5, whatever. All of FedRAMP. It's the people part. So one lesson learned that we learned, or that really rung true with us, is so you're lowering this footprint for your people. What's going to happen with your workforce? Workforce is seeing, is my job being outsourced? And these are people who are dedicated that have brought us up to this point. So you need a solid workforce design to make sure that those people see, okay, what does the next 5 years look like? What does it look like for me professionally? How can I get better skills and get retooled to make sure that I'm there a part of 2025? So that was a big lesson learned for us. And that's the stakeholder part of the people within your own organization. Data center optimization is not realized unless you have portfolio rationalization. A lift and shift doesn't work. Okay, it saves you.
Certainly, if you stay there. Yeah.
Right. So it works from a standpoint. Okay, so immediately we get there and get it into the cloud, lower our footprint, decommission, whatever. Is it tied to mission? Do you have redundancy? Can you look at those workloads, those functions, and can you consolidate? And that's, as Melonie was pointing out, it's senior leadership to understand. If you're looking at a national or air traffic control facility and they have workloads that have to be centrally located or what have you, we've got to make sure that they understand exactly what we're doing with that function, that part of the mission, so that they buy in. And the same with the aviation safety side. I mean, everyone has their groups that they have to work with.
And that user experience needs to be the same or better than it was when you started the project,
Absolutely.
Right? Very important.
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to take another short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. With me on today's show are Sean Torpey with the FAA, Monique Bourque with Department of Justice, Anthony Vicinelly with Nlyte Software, Melonie Parker with Department of State, Jonathan Alboum with Veritas Public Sector, and David P. with Equinix. We're talking about data center optimization. We were talking specifically about lessons learned. I'm going to throw it over to you, Anthony, at Nlyte Software. Tell us about a lessons learned that you'd like to share with our community
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
respect to some of these activities and projects that have been going on that you guys have been involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we find is that we tend to sit, or we and Nlyte tend to sit in between IT and facilities, and that is sometimes not.
Can be a tricky place to be.
It can, yeah. So you're sometimes not speaking the same language to one another, right? And so what we find is to just continue to ask questions and to focus on what the mission or the goal is for optimizing the data center. And so one of the examples that comes to mind is that we were looking to instrument to get some real-time data from specifically from some of the infrastructure in the building, right? But the customer did not own the building, and so they couldn't get the metrics that they needed to measure, right? And so they were thinking about investing money to kind of get the sensors where they needed to be able to get this data. And it just came down to, well, let's just ask if we can get a data feed from the building, right? It was just that one question they said, yeah, absolutely. You can't, from a security standpoint, you can't tie into us, but we can give you the data, right? So it was just that one question that then allowed us to move forward, allowed us to get a rich data set where then people could start to say, oh, this is what we're actually using from a building power perspective.
Sure.
Right?
Sometimes all you have to do is ask, and a lot of times you need to know what to ask for, right?
That's right.
Sometimes you're into those situations. Monique, you've shared a bunch of things over at Justice that you're doing there. Tell us about a lessons learned that you'd like to share with the community that maybe a gotcha or something, a positive or a negative.
Yeah, so I echo Sean and Melonie's comments. I mean, it really is it's the relationships, it's the trust factor. At the end of the day, it's our colleagues. We're holding each other accountable. It's our industry partnerships. So that is definitely high, and it resonates from all throughout the organization. I think I wanted to highlight a couple other areas that I thought have. It took a little growing pains, but we worked through, and I think we're in a good cadence now that has helped us. We have a really integrated our DCTI, Data Center Transformation Initiative team with our cloud management team. They're side by side. They go to the meetings with the teams. They really have helped, and that took a little while to get our arms around that and have everyone think of it that way. But really sharing that knowledge, they share staff. They can go out, and it's. As soon as they're talking to one customer or component, we know exactly what the issue is. We can help them resolve right there. Time is so limited. So you get an hour or half an hour meeting with someone to have all the right resources and subject matter expertise, focused in a few people, critical people that when they're meeting, even with industry partnership across cybersecurity, across our operations, we're trying to mature our TIC services, all those things come into play. And working with our industry partners, because those are the people that we meet up with, Microsoft, Amazon, whoever we're working with. We're dealing with performance issues. You're hitting you're hitting those upper limits when you're trying to transfer data, and sort of working through all those tricks of the trade and making sure all that information is disseminated. So having that really closely integrated team. It's a few folks. It's not a lot. In our case, it's less than 6. But they can really share that knowledge, and so we're that brain trust that can help in those critical situations, and the perceived go-to people in the department. So that has really helped.
Sure, sort of fusing them all together, forming your own sort of SEAL Team 6, if you will, of capability there to work through it. It makes a lot of sense. Well, we always like to roll it up and talk about sort of what the future looks like. I'm going to ask you, Dave, we're going to do a little bit of a twofer here, maybe a quick lessons learned, and then tell us about the future. What's it look like for an agency that wants to use your goods and services in 3 years, 3 to 5 years type thing? What's cooking over there in the lab at Equinix?
Sure. So on the first question, I think I love the term cloud smart. I think that's really in essence what most of the dialogue has been about, is cloud smart. And so kind of for the agencies to take a step back and look at the total cost of ownership and what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years, because the world is getting more interconnected, and that's really the true value of what Equinix does. In the future, I believe most dynamic is going to be software-defined networking. If you think of the network like your iPhone and just how much And you can think of the network that way, that people are going to be spinning up apps that are running on the network that you never even thought of. And so if you think of it like your iPhone and how much that's changed, you think, well, I need a clock. No, you don't need a clock, it's on your phone. I need a camera. No, you don't, it's on your phone. And the network is going to be that way, and it's going to integrate in with the data centers. And so it's going to change the architecture of what we do, because brilliant people are going to be writing these apps that run across the network, and it's going to do data center optimization, it's going to do network functions. We have a software-defined interconnect partnership with Verizon, where they're dynamically provisioning connectivity between our data centers, and you're just going to see more of that, and the application is going to be broader, and I think where it's going to go is going to be limitless.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really think about that, but you really do have an end user device optimization on your phone, right? So I guess we've all sort of personally experienced that, right? So Jonathan, how about at Veritas? You guys are always cooking things up there.
Sure.
What's the future look like in regards to that?
We think the future, is heavily driven by data. And that data...
It's all about the data, right?
It's all about the data. And the data in our data centers is what will drive our adoption of machine learning, artificial intelligence, data-driven decisions, evidence-based policymaking act. All that data is in the data centers we're talking about here. And an agency's ability to access that data when they need it, and their trust in the data, that it's the right data, they have a great opportunity to use emerging technologies to really transform the way they serve the citizen. But again, it all comes back to the data. And if agencies are able to harness the power of that data, they can do great things. You can't do that in an unoptimized environment. And data center optimization is not just about having fewer data centers, but it's about having data centers that operate at peak performance, right? So it's using the tools that we've talked about, or that are in our environments today, or ones we acquire, in order to really fine-tune what's managed by feds in these organizations. And that's a big part of getting your hands around the data in your environment that will drive the future of your agency.
Yeah, it's optimizing the performance and having the capability to scale up and perform during, again, these peak stress periods. Every agency has their own sort of dynamic to that.
That's right. You can't do that if you're overwhelmed by dark data or dark storage,
sure,
right? Or redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. You really need to be focused on what your data is and managing what's necessary to move
100%, or sub-optimized computing. Melonie, how about at State? If I'm a freshly minted diplomat coming into the State Department, or there's a new CIO coming in 5 years, what's that going to look like? What's that environment going to be? What's the future look like for the State Department?
Well, first of all, I'm probably still be around, so I'll welcome you to Department of State.
Well, it's not me. It could be anybody, right?
Right, whoever, right. What does it look like?
What does it feel like? I mean, what are you guys cooking over there?
Looking at more automation. We talked about the people aspect. People aspect is good. Artificial intelligence that cannot hold this type of conversation and things of that nature. So the people element, but we still need to look at automation, and we need to look at it from a standpoint that those things that can be automated, we do, and those things, kind of a hybrid thing, I think it was said earlier today. We look at cloud smart. Again, another mandate, we're looking at that, but we don't throw some of the good things that are working, like the virtual first policy, like the cloud first that has now elevated to cloud smart. We don't throw those things out of the door, but we can enhance and we can modernize and stand on those. I'm also looking at more shared services. I think that the federal agencies, and just from some of the other community of practice events that we attend, we hear more and more about shared services. How can I leverage? Monique may have something great going on over at Justice, and why would I reinvent the wheel? I can go and speak with Monique or Sean and their staff, and figure out how can we either leverage what they already have by standing up our own if necessary, but why stand up our own if we can leverage shared services through their organization?
Of course, and look, I mean, the federal government's hadn't been doing shared services for a long time. I mean, the payroll systems at USDA and a couple of the other agencies have been in place for 2 and 3 decades, right? They work really well. And again, now some of this technology that's available, it allows an agency to become a shared service provider a whole lot more effective and efficient than has been done in the past, which is really great. I mean, I think that's all part of smart computing, right?
Yes.
Smart capabilities is leveraging these various assets. Anthony, how about at Nlyte? What does the future look like? What do you see out there as we're trying to sort of work through sort of the next generation of this capability? What is Nlyte going to be able to offer in those types of circumstances?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'll kind of classify that as, the near future and then maybe a little bit further future.
Sure.
Right? So, in the near term, the
near term would be what? 1 year, 2 years?
0 to 1 year.
0 to 1 year. So that's very near. We're talking
so
3 to 5 years here.
So currently, we are looking, or we do artificial intelligence for being able to predict events in the data center. And so the prerequisite to that was having the right type of metering in place to be able to gather enough information to feed the AI to get trustworthy predictions, right? And so currently we are able to look at things like temperature, any of the telemetry in the data center really, to be able to inform us about temperature spikes or power spikes in the data center. And we can currently do that with in 60 minutes into the future. Right, so we can say, because of the workloads in this area of the data center, because of the temperature, because of the time of year it is that might be summer versus winter, right? We may have a temperature spike in the data center. So that is the current state of things. What I see is that the trust, the AI needs to start to earn our trust, right? To be able to then add automation onto that. What am I able to then let the trigger from those events from an automated perspective. And so what we start to see then is being able to intelligently move workloads between on-prem or colo or cloud solutions to be able to divert those workloads to where they most efficiently would run, or they would where we have the most availability or the least risk, right, based off of what our
I mean, that's awesome. If you think about it, in order to make AI effective, right, you've got to have good information, good data, good patterns. And the fact that you're collecting this data in a way that's secure and all those sort of things, and feeding an AI engine to allow it to make those decisions, fascinating, right? It makes a lot of sense. Monique, how about at Justice? What does the future look like? You're sort of in almost a second stage there, it sounds like, based on your description. You what does it look like in 3 to 5 years for the Justice Department?
Yeah. So, I mean, our goal and our vision is, is to continue to maturing these shared services. So, and one of the key for us at Justice is sort of we have our data strategy, sharing strategy out that we released earlier this year, is how do we sort of marry that with our vision with data center optimization, our cloud smart strategy going forward. And at the end of the day, we would like to have our data located in the most optimal locations, right, to move forward and harness its knowledge and intelligence, and how can we use that to move and improve our mission support going forward. So that's sort of like our end goal. All these layers we're working on should help us move towards advancing our mission and be sort of partnered and ready to fully take advantage of the data analytics piece as we move forward. So
really positioning yourself so that data is available when and where you need it, and then being smart about the analytics behind that, whether it's AI or any of these other capabilities.
Right, and at the network piece, we have the speeds in place. It's not a hindrance. We're making use of our appropriate industry partners to make sure we're getting the performance we should and expect. Data secure, it's appropriately, reused based on your access and ability from a sharing perspective. You don't have access to data you're not supposed to. So all those sort of gates and everything are built in. And at the end of the day, they're not barriers to being able to perform your mission.
You don't have to sort of Frankenstein all that together with all these different technologies to try to make that kind of capability work. Makes a lot of sense. Sean, how about at the FAA? What does that look like out there? I know we've heard a lot in the news about sort of the next generation of FAA and some of these automated capabilities that you all are putting together, et cetera, being able to have more density in the AORs. all that kind of good stuff. So what does that future look like for the FAA in 3 to 5 years?
Sure. So we just spent some time this past spring and summer looking at our next, our 5-year strategy for IT, 20 to 25. And one of the pillars that we're looking at is user experience and making sure that's improved so that FAA employees, safety inspectors, air traffic controllers, just everyone who supports the mission can do their job easier. They can use these tools and they can make it easier for them to work. And then also on the flip side, showing our industry partners, manufacturers, airlines, drone operators. Drone operators are exploding at this point, and making sure that they have the user experience to interact with the agency to make sure that it's just easier for them to do what they want to do within the airspace. So I kind of go back to some of the things that we talked about before. Really, it's a portfolio rationalization. It's about data management and governance strategy. Having all these things in place, workforce design that we talked about, and then quite honestly, that stakeholder partner piece that will really enable cloud, machine learning, and AI, because those are going to be the enablers of this user experience that we're trying to work towards. Drive innovation through, doing the right things, kind of the legwork, so that people really see the value of our mission.
Sure, and that workforce, sort of design workforce entity as you evolve this technology. Super important to bring them along, right? So they feel like they're part of the mission, right? So that's important. Well, fascinating topic, and I wanted to thank all of you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to join us for this program. I'd also like to thank the sponsors for without we don't have a show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Radio that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.